I upgraded our family to first class using your 500,000 travel miles. You can fly economy. My brother texted from the airport lounge. Mom, he has a week back. Be a good brother. I said nothing. I called the airline, reported my frequent flyer, card is stolen, and voided every single ticket. When the gate agent called security while they were boarding, I was standing at gate B14 at Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport on a Tuesday morning in March of 2024 when my phone buzzed in the chest pocket of my jacket. I had just come off a 48-hour shift. I want you to understand what that means. Not 48 hours of dozing in a recliner waiting for a call, 48 hours of a chest compression bruise forming on both my palms of a woman named Darlene Hutchinson, 67 years old, flatlining twice in the back of the rig on Interstate 394, of her coming back the second time and saying, "Did I die?" And me having to decide how to answer that while her oxygen saturation climbed back toward 92. 48 hours of one cardiac event, two overdoses, a construction worker named Felix Ramos with a rebar through his left thigh, and a 4-year-old boy I will not describe further because some things you carry without saying out loud. I had showered at the station. I had driven 40 minutes in my 2017 Honda CR-V with 212,000 miles on it to the airport. I had parked in the long-term lot, walked the shuttle bus to the terminal, and I was standing at gate B14 with a boarding pass in my hand for a seat in row 22, the middle seat between two strangers. I was exhausted in the way that lives below tiredness, in the way that settles into the back of your neck and stays there. My gate was not yet open. I sat down in one of those black vinyl airport chairs and took out my phone. The text was from my brother, Derek Callahan. He is 38 years old, 3 years younger than me. He sells commercial real estate in Scottsdale, Arizona. He drives a 2023 BMW 5 Series, and he has, in the 11 years since he moved to Arizona, called our mother more than he has called me, which is to say he has called me approximately 4 times. The text said this: "Hey bro, had to upgrade the seats. Back been killing me. Used your miles for the family. You're an economy. Lounge is great. Haha. Safe flight." I read it twice. I want to be precise about the miles, because the miles are the whole point. I had accumulated 514,000 frequent flyer miles on Delta Airlines over 6 years of working medical transport contracts that required me to fly standby on my own time to cover shifts in Duluth, in Rochester, in Bismarck, North Dakota, in Fargo, in places where the local EMS services were understaffed, and called our agency, and our agency called me, because I was the one who always said yes. 6 years of middle seats and 5 a.m. departures, and eating whatever was left in the terminal at 9:30 at night. 514,000 miles that I had been saving for one specific purpose. My daughter, Marisol Callahan, was turning 8 years old in June of 2024. I had promised her a trip to see my mother in Tampa, Florida. And I had promised her specifically that we would sit up front, that she would get the warm nuts and the little bottle of water and the seat that laid flat. She had seen a video about it on YouTube, and she had told me about it for 3 weeks straight. "Dad, you get warm nuts." That is what she said. "Dad, you get warm nuts." I have laughed every time. But before I tell you what I did next, and what happened at that gate 40 minutes later, you need to understand what kind of family I come from, and what kind of man I have spent my life trying not to be. My father, Raymond Callahan, was a union pipe fitter out of St. Paul, Minnesota. He worked for 31 years for the same contractor, Hendricks and Brower Mechanical. And he came home every day with his hands the color of old engine grease, no matter how hard he scrubbed them. He was not a complicated man. He believed in showing up, and he believed that the people in your family were the people you showed up for. No exceptions, no conditions, no asterisks. He died of a coronary event in November of 2019 at 64 years old. He died on a Tuesday, which I know because I was on shift, and the call came in through dispatch because the neighbor found him. And for approximately 45 seconds before the address resolved on my screen, I did not know it was him. I was the one who ran the call. I have never told anyone that. Not my mother, not my ex-wife, Carrie, who I was still married to at the time. Not Derek. My father had a saying that he used constantly, to the point where it became something my brother and I rolled our eyes at when we were teenagers, and something I now say to Marisol without thinking about it. He would say, "You don't get to decide what you owe people. You only get to decide whether you pay it." Derek decided long ago that he did not owe much. It was not one thing. It never is. It was Derek not coming home when our father had his first minor cardiac event in 2017 because he had a deal closing. It was Derek showing up to our father's funeral for exactly one day and flying back to Scottsdale the next morning because he said he could not leave Sandra, his wife, alone with the kids for longer than that, even though Sandra's parents live 40 minutes from their house. It was Derek telling my mother, Elaine Callahan, 68 years old, retired dental hygienist, living on Social Security and a small pension from Hennepin County, that he was working on bringing her to visit every 6 months for 4 years. It was me buying her the ticket to Tampa this past January. Me driving her to her cardiologist appointments. Me being the person she called at 2 in the morning when she thought she heard something outside her apartment. I did not resent this. I want to be clear about that. I did not resent it because my father told me not to waste good feeling on resentment. What I resented was something different. What I resented was Derek turning it into a performance. Acting. At every family gathering, at every holiday phone call, like the score was even. Like his presence, when it arrived, was a gift, so generous it wiped out every absence. This trip to Tampa was the first time our family had traveled together since our father's funeral. My mother had asked, back in January, whether we could all go together. She had used the word together in a way that made it impossible to say no. She is 68 years old with a mitral valve condition, and she was asking for one trip where her 2 sons were in the same airport at the same time. I said yes. I called Derek. Derek said he was in, that Sandra and the 2 boys, Katie, 11, and Tyler, 9, would come, that it would be great. I booked the tickets. I applied the miles. I put Derek, Sandra, Cade, and Tyler in Comfort Plus seats in rows 6 and 7, because Derek had mentioned in the past that he preferred extra legroom. I put my mother in row 5 on the aisle because of her knees. I put Marisol and myself in row 22, middle and window, because that was what was left after I had taken care of everyone else, and because I did not mind. I genuinely did not mind. I had kept 514,000 miles for 6 years, and I spent 392,000 of them on this trip. And I thought for the remaining 122,000, I would wait until June and take Marisol up front. Just the 2 of us. Warm nuts, little bottle of water. That was the plan. Derek had access to the reservation because I had shared the confirmation code with him in January, so he could see his seat assignment. That is all I gave him. The confirmation code. What he did with it was call Delta Airlines, claim to be the primary account holder, upgrade himself, Sandra, Cade, and Tyler to first-class seats in rows 2 and 3, and place my mother in Comfort Plus, which was a lateral move, a side shuffle, not an upgrade. And then he moved me from row 22 to row 29, the last row. The row that does not recline because it is directly in front of the lavatory wall. And then he sent me that text from the Delta Sky Club at 8 a.m. Had to upgrade the seats. Back been killing me. I sat in that black vinyl chair at gate B14, and I read the text again. Then my phone rang. It was my mother. Jonathan, Derek told me what he did, and I just want you to know he means well. His back really has been bothering him. You know he has that history with his L4 and L5. You're a medical professional. You understand these things. I said, Mom. She said, he's your brother. Be a good brother. I said, I understand. I hung up. I sat there for a moment. The gate was not yet open. There were maybe 30 people in the seating area. A woman across from me was feeding Cheerios to a toddler, one at a time. A man in a Carhartt jacket was asleep with his mouth open. The departure board said the flight to Tampa was on time. I thought about my father. Specifically, I thought about his hands. How they were never fully clean. How he held a wrench the way some men hold a steering wheel, with a kind of permanent comfort. like the grip was part of his anatomy. I thought about what he would say in this exact moment, and I knew with a certainty that felt like bone that he would not say, "Let it go. He's your brother." My father was a man who believed in showing up. He also believed in consequences. He used to say, and this was the other thing he said so often, it became wallpaper. Respect is not the same thing as forgiveness. You can forgive a man and still make him face what he did. I took out my phone. I called Delta Airlines. The number is on the back of the card. I have the card memorized because I have used it so many times that the numbers on the front have worn smooth. A representative named Brianna answered. I know her name because I wrote it down. I said, I need to report my frequent flyer account as compromised. Someone accessed it without my authorization and made changes to a reservation. Brianna said, I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Callahan. Can you verify your account number and the last 4 digits of your social security number? I gave her both. She said, can you describe the unauthorized changes? I said 4 passengers had their seats upgraded to first class using my miles without my permission. I did not authorize this. The charges total approximately 222,000 miles. She said, I see that here. Do you know who may have accessed your account? I said, I do not know. Someone had my confirmation number. There was a pause. Brianna was typing. She said, Mr. Callahan, what I can do is flag the account, reverse the unauthorized redemptions, and restore the original seating assignments. Hugh. However, the first class seats that were booked with the reversed miles will be released and those passengers will be returned to their previously assigned seats or the next available equivalent. Do you want me to proceed? I said, yes, please proceed. She said, this will also trigger a security lock on the account and a temporary hold. All tickets on this reservation will need to be re-verified at the gate. There may be a brief delay for those passengers during boarding. I said, I understand, she said. Is there anything else I can help you with today, Mr. Callahan? I said, no, thank you, Brianna. I hung up. I put my phone in my pocket. The gate opened at 9:15 in the morning. I stood in line. I was in the last boarding group, Group E, because my seat was in row 29. I watched the other groups board. I watched Group A board, which was first class. I did not see Derek or Sandra or the boys come through the general boarding area, which meant they were already in the Sky Club or had boarded through the priority lane earlier. At 9:43 in the morning, the gate agent, a man named Carl, I could see his name badge from 10 feet away. Carl picked up his intercom handset. He said, over the airport speaker system, we have a seating issue for passengers Callahan. D, Callahan, S, Callahan, C, and Callahan, T. Would those passengers please return to the gate immediately? I was standing in the Group E line. I did not move. I waited. 2 minutes later, I heard Derek before I saw him. He is a voice that was built to fill rooms. He played lacrosse in college, and he never fully came down from it. What do you mean there's an issue? We're already seated. Carl said calmly, the way good gate agents are calm, with a specific and practiced neutrality. Sir, there has been a flag on this reservation related to the redemption of frequent flyer miles for your seats. The miles used for the first class upgrade have been reversed. Your original seats in Comfort Plus are available. Derek said, that is insane. Those miles were... My brother authorized me. Carl said, sir, I have a notation here that the account holder reported unauthorized access and requested reversal. I'm going to need you to move to Comfort Plus, or we cannot complete your boarding. Sandra said something I could not hear. One of the boys said something. Then there was a longer pause, and in that pause, I moved forward with my group. I walked past the gate desk. Derek saw me. He said, Jonathan. He said it the way you say a name when you are putting a meaning inside it that you cannot say out loud in an airport. I looked at him. I said, hey, Derek. I kept walking. The gate agent, Carl, looked at me and then back at his screen, and his expression did not change because Carl was a professional and Carl had seen everything. I walked down the jetway and I found my seat in row 29. The seat did not recline. The lavatory was directly behind me. I put my bag in the overhead bin. I sat down. I put on my headphones. 40 minutes later, we took off. Now I need to tell you what happened when we landed. Because this is not a story about an airplane. This is a story about what happens when the person who taught you what family means is no longer alive to be the referee, and the family has to figure out what it is without him. We landed in Tampa at 2:17 in the afternoon. I had slept for most of the flight, which tells you everything you need to know about how tired I was. When I came off the jetway into the terminal, my mother was standing near the baggage claim sign with her roller bag and her good beige cardigan, and her expression that I recognized immediately as the one she uses when she has been crying and has decided to stop. She said, "Jonathan." I said, "Mom, how was the flight?" She said, "You know very well how it was." I said, "Are you okay?" She said, "My knee is fine. The seat was fine. Your brother is furious." I said, "I know." She said, "What did you do?" I said, "I protected my account from unauthorized access." She looked at me for a long moment. Elaine Callahan has the kind of eyes that your father passes down to you without meaning to. Brown, steady, with a way of holding the question longer than is comfortable. She said, "Your father would have handled this differently." I said, "No, Mom, I don't think he would have." She pressed her lips together. She took her roller bag and we walked toward baggage claim. Derek did not speak to me that day or the next. We were staying at a rented house on Bayshore Boulevard, a 3-bedroom house with a screened porch and a pool, which I had also arranged and paid for, because that is the kind of detail that does not come up when Derek describes his role in family events. He and Sandra and the boys took the 2 larger bedrooms. My mother took the 3rd. Marisol and I took the pull-out couch in the living room, which was not comfortable and which Marisol declared actually kind of like camping, and therefore acceptable. On the second morning, my mother came and sat next to me on the porch while Marisol was in the pool with her cousins and Derek and Sandra were still asleep. It was 7:20 in the morning. She had 2 coffees, and she gave me one. She said, "Tell me the truth, did he do something really wrong, or were you just angry?" I said, "He took 500,000 miles that I spent 6 years earning on 48-hour shifts, and he used them without asking me, and he put you in a worse seat than what I had already given you, and he texted me from the lounge like it was funny." My mother was quiet. She said, 500,000. I said, 514,000. She said, "He told me you had extra." I said, "I had 122,000 left. I was saving them for Marisol, her birthday trip. I promised her first class." My mother set down her coffee. She did not say anything for a while. The pool filter hummed. A pelican landed on the seawall across the canal and sat there like it was waiting for the meeting to start. She said, "He doesn't understand what things cost you." I said, "No." She said, "He never has." I said, "No." She said, "That's my fault, Jonathan, some of it." I said, "No." She said, "No. Let me say it. I let him believe you were the steady one who didn't need anything. That's not fairness. That's just laziness dressed up like trust." I drank my coffee. The pelican lifted off and disappeared over the rooftops. I said, "Dad used to say you don't get to decide what you owe. You only get to decide whether you pay it." She said, "I know. I heard him say it 800 times. She paused. I think he was talking about himself as much as anything. I said, "I know. Me too." On the 4th day of the trip, Derek knocked on the door of the screened porch where I was reading. He came in and sat down in the wicker chair across from me. He was wearing a Scottsdale Athletic Club t-shirt, and he looked, for the first time in possibly a decade, like he was not sure what to say. He said, "Sandra thinks I should apologize." I said, "What do you think?" He said, I thought you wouldn't care. You're always the guy who doesn't care about stuff like that." I said, "What stuff?" He said, "Comfort, the good seat, whatever." I said, "Derek, I spent 6 years flying standby to Bismarck, North Dakota at 4 in the morning on my days off to cover EMS shifts because they needed a paramedic, and I was the one who said yes. Every time I got on a plane, the miles clicked up. I was saving them. I wasn't saving them because I don't care about comfort. I was saving them for one thing." He said, "What thing?" I said, "Marisol, birthday trip, first class." I told her she'd get warm nuts. The silence that followed was not comfortable. Derek said, "I didn't know that." I said, "No, because you didn't ask." He said, "I'm sorry, Jonathan." He said it the way I believed he meant it, which is to say, simply, without decoration, without the performance. Just those 3 words with nowhere to hide behind them. I said, "Okay." He said, "Is that enough?" I said, "It's a start." He said, "What does a finish look like?" I said, "Show up. For mom. For real. Not for the performance of it. Not because it makes you look like the good son. Because she has a mitral valve condition. And she is 68 years old. And she lives alone. And she should not have to wonder whether her son will come when it matters." Derek was quiet for a long time. He said, "Dad should have been here to say that." I said, "Yeah, he should have." He said, "Do you think about him when you're on the job?" I said, "Every time." He said, "I think about him every morning," which sounds stupid given everything. I said, "It doesn't sound stupid." We sat there together on the porch in the Tampa humidity, the two of us, with the pool visible through the screen and the sound of our kids somewhere inside the house, and neither of us said anything else for a while. It was the longest we had sat in the same room without an agenda in 11 years. That is not a resolution. That is a beginning. I want to be honest about that. The trip ended on a Sunday. We flew back separately, Derek to Phoenix, me and Marisol to Minneapolis. My mother took a cab back to her apartment on the other side of Tampa. Before I went through security, she hugged me for longer than usual. She is small, my mother, shorter than she used to be, and she smelled like the same lavender soap she has used since I was 9 years old. She held on, and then she said quietly, into my shoulder, "I see you, Jonathan. I always see you." I should have said it more. I did not say anything. I held on for another second. Then I let go because the line was moving. It is now July of 2024. Marzel's birthday is the 14th. We fly out of Minneapolis on the morning of the 12th. I called Delta 3 weeks ago and redeemed 122,000 miles. Row 2, window, and middle. Both of us. I have not told her about the warm nuts. I am going to let it be a surprise. In the mornings now, before my shift, I sit at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and I think about what it costs to show up. Not the dollars, not the miles. The actual cost, the thing that gets paid in hours and presence and choices made at 4 a.m. when no one is watching and there is no performance to give. My father paid it every day for 31 years and never once asked to be credited. I used to think that was just who he was. Now I think it was a choice he made so quietly that it became who he was. There is a difference. The choice is the part you can inherit. On my refrigerator, there is a drawing Marisol made of an airplane. She drew 2 figures in the front row, one tall and one short. She labeled the short one me and the tall one, Dad. Under the airplane she wrote, in green crayon, "First class is the best class." I look at it every morning. I think about a man with permanently stained hands who flew exactly once in his life to see his own father in Galveston, Texas, in 1980 in a middle seat in row 31, and who never once said it wasn't enough. It was not about the seat. It was never about the seat. It was about whether you believed you were worth the front row. And whether, when someone tried to tell you otherwise, by sliding your name to the back without asking, you knew clearly enough who you were to pick up the phone and say, "That is mine and I did not give it to you." My brother did not give me that clarity. Strangely, he did. Not by apologizing, though that mattered. By proving, in one casual Tuesday morning text from a Sky Club he did not earn, that the thing I had always half believed was true. That nobody was going to save your seat for you. That you had to hold it yourself. My father knew that. He just held it so quietly that I almost missed the lesson. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever worked for something so long and so quietly that the people closest to you forgot it had a cost? Have you ever been the steady one, the one who doesn't need anything so convincingly that even you started to believe it? And here's the one I want you to sit with. What is sitting in row 29 in your life right now? What did you earn? What did you save? What did you build slowly and without announcement that someone else is sitting in comfortably without ever having asked? And do you know clearly enough that it is yours?